Hi everybody, as an introduction to today's fireside chat with Karen Rudich, I just wanted to link the fact that the UK 200 group conducted a survey on access to funding, and ELEMENTARYb is trying to create a system that will help SMEs access funding. So basically what we wanted to achieve today is to see how does the vision of ELEMENTARYb glue back to the role of trusted advisors, accountants, and lawyers, and how this project and this vision can actually support accountants, help the SMEs and their clients. And it's really about shortening the timeline to get to cash. So we look forward to getting your feedback and hear back from you. Hello everybody and welcome to this UK 200 group fireside chat. My name is Johnstone-Rouzier and I'm the head of ecosystem events at Innovate Finance. And with me today I have Karen Rudich, the co-founder and CEO of ELEMENTARYb, to discuss SMEs access to cash, growth in times of crisis and beyond. Karen, welcome.
Hello.
How would you introduce yourself in one sentence?
I would say that I'm a little bit of a banker entrepreneur, which is unusual. I like to challenge the status quo and deliver things that people don't really think about. So been in banking for 20 years, engineer at heart, and an absolute data geek in reality.
Wow, what a cocktail. Thank you for that. Let's get to the core topic. So we want to talk about SMEs access to cash and talk about the current situation with the coronavirus, the lockdown and how it impacts SMEs. But we also want to talk of beyond the crisis. So I'm going to start with a simple question, Karen. When it comes to SMEs accessing cash, why is there a problem?
I think it's been a problem for a long time. It's something that's definitely been exacerbated by the current pandemic and the situation and emergency funding. But unfortunately, the reality is that it's very difficult for the banks to grant access to funding without having a very clear picture about all the liabilities, all the assets, the growth trajectory, the opportunities of an SME. And for SMEs in particular, it's difficult to have all of that aggregated data in one single place to then be able to hand it over to the banks to make a credit decision. So I think that's been a long time challenge. I think it's exacerbated by the lack of use of new technology that can streamline that access and especially have a real-time view of where things are. And so I think it's been a long-term struggle and a long-term challenge.
All right, so you mentioned that the tech was one of the problems, that was like one of the factors exacerbating the problem. It's a mouthful of a word. Can we put things back now in the context of COVID-19? And the government has put in place support for SMEs, and notably the CIBLS, and yet we keep hearing that is still a problem when it comes to access to cash. Why is the problems kind of raising to the surface right now?
I mean, this is a personal view, but having been inside of the banks, you realize that everything is still very heavily paper-based. And processing a 280-page application, particularly not for the smaller SMEs, but the slightly larger SMEs that have more complex operations, a more complex legal and jurisdictional structure, and filling in 280 forms that then have to be manually processed inside of the bank, and then data gathered from different data sources, both in and out of the bank, is still a challenge. And I think it's a timing thing. It's not for lack of want that the banks are not able to do it, but the hard truth is that although they have spent a lot of money digitizing a number of processes, not everything really is truly digital. And that's on the banking side, but that's also unfortunately on the SME side, where a lot of information is still manually gathered. It's still sitting in Excel spreadsheets that then have to be put into paper-based forms.
All right, you kind of answered already my next question, and it's great, but can we go back on because I like pointing fingers, who's responsible for the situation? Or more we'll look at incumbents bank who have who are the organization mainly processing these applications. What's their role in this conundrum? What could they do to make SMEs' life easier?
That's a really good question. Okay, I'm not a fan of pointing fingers because I think, unfortunately, the situation we are in is it's a combination of many factors, and it takes two to tango, right? And in this case, I think it takes three key forces to tango. The government has been very slow to be able to issue funding via alternative lenders. And, one statistic that I received that was quoted in one of the other panels I was in was around 75% of funding in the UK is going via the big banks, versus the opposite is true in America, where 75% of the funding is going via the challengers, a number of specialist lenders, non-specialist lenders, marketplaces, et cetera. And so I think the government got it a little bit wrong when they started to be able to drive that liquidity into the market as such an emergency situation. I do think that, unfortunately, the banks have not been able to modernize as quickly as they hoped they would be able to. And that's just a natural path of the fact that they've also had to keep up with regulation that continually changes. I also do think that, unfortunately, the SMEs perhaps didn't really know how critical their time was, and how sustainable to shocks and stress testing capabilities their business model was. And it's around resilience, right? And when you're running a company, and I've been in that situation before with my previous one, you think you have runway in terms of cash flow, and maybe a small little mistake, or the fact that one single client, you're too dependent on one or two clients, comes up to the forefront, and then you realize that your runway in terms of managing your cash is a lot shorter than you had originally planned for. And that's under normal circumstances. The situation with COVID right now is unprecedented. There are businesses that were extremely well planned, resilient, and would have never in a million years have expected that their shops were going to be forced to close because of social distancing and the pandemic. So I think it's become, unfortunately, the perfect storm. So I would say at the moment, no one really is to blame. And it's really a focus on, let's just get on with it, and how are we going to fix this and get that cash into the hands of those SMEs faster.
All right. So it's really interesting that you mentioned, this situation that is unprecedented, and I was listening to the theory of Schumpeter this morning, and creative destruction, and how innovation and entrepreneurs rise in times like that. So I'm delighted we've got a chance to chat with you right now, because I understand you have a vision, and that vision can actually be a factor of supporting a better access to cash to SMEs. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I think so. My vision is born out of experience. And I mentioned earlier, I ran a mid-sized company where your turnover is close to 10 million pounds. You are highly profitable. And then, unfortunately, one of your client owes you millions. And you're kind of stuck, even thought, best planning intentions in place, that you're about to have to close shop, or you don't know what your capital requirement is and how long you can tread water for. And out of that frustration, kind of coupled with the fact that I've been transforming banks for over 20 years, I thought it couldn't have just been me. I looked around, realized that there were a lot of companies that, CEOs and CFOs in particular, where you can be smooth sailing, and then something happens. And during that time, everybody wants to talk to you, wants to be your friend, and sell you lots of products that you don't need. And then, it hits the ceiling fan, and all of a sudden nobody's there. You realize that, suddenly all your wannabe friends that wanted to sell your products no longer want to lend you any money or help you out with your working capital. And I thought, I've had enough. I mean, at that point, I had enough. I thought, it's not okay. There's been a lot of focus on very small companies, on retail, on very large profitable corporates as well. But, the heart of the UK business turnover sits in the mid-sized sector. So companies between 6 and 100 million pounds of annual turnover. And, they're the core of the growth. And I thought somebody's got to do something about it. But I didn't want to go down the traditional path either. I started exploring what risk management, company optimization, and financial management should look like in the future. And being a bit of a data geek, I thought it's got to start with a client's needs. And this is where the ELEMENTARYb vision actually really has its foundations. It's around giving control back to those mid-sized companies by enabling them to have a real-time view of all of their financial transactions, all of their financial data, look forward into the future, and then give them options to model different scenarios, stress test their business model. But because you're dealing with real-time data, be able to surface insights that they would otherwise not normally pick up, and then give them the choice of what's best in class, what's the best pricing product out there. It may not always be a product, it's a solution. It might be that they need to optimize their sales cycle. And this is where I think the future around financial and risk management sits for companies. It transcends just purely banking, just purely accounting, or even, insurance. It is around having the tools at your fingertips to manage your company, be sustainable, be resilient to the big market events, and grow or stabilize. Whatever your strategy is put you back in the power to do that.
So, given that we're talking with the UK 200 group, how does your vision fit and gather some interest for this specific group?
Well, our business model is very much based on it's a platform, an intelligence-driven platform that can gain access to best-in-class products and solutions out there. But it's also an ecosystem model. It is around ensuring that we bring to the table the trusted advisors that are already working with these SMEs to continue to support their clients, because actually they're the ones that know and understand their clients best. So it's around being able to ensure that through the platform they have the content, a single client view, the tools and options to discuss, to extract information, to liaise with the client's teams, different teams sometimes, and be really part of that growth process and that ambition to help their clients and advise them on a more strategic basis. And that's where we really see a lot of the existing advisors definitely playing a key role in being able to continue that sustainability for our clients.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Karen. I think it would be great to hear some feedback from the UK 200 group members and see what they think about that. I'm sure we'll hear back from you again. Thank you so much, Karen.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.